Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the McKinney number MK67001. This is a concealed hinge that is a three-way or 3D adjustable hinge. There's a few people who make these, and I imagine that McKinney is getting into the party, so to speak, of the people that manufacture these. These are relatively simple and straightforward items. And this is the first time I'm seeing this hinge. Okay, so let's take a closer look at this. I've reviewed other concealed multi-adjustability hinges from other people, and they all pretty much work the same way. They're going to allow you a little bit of adjustment this way, this way, this way, and that's certainly nice to be able to do that. A lot of people swear by the ability to adjust the hinge after installation. You know, the bottom line is if you're installing it exactly per the template, there's no need to adjust. The issue with that logic is, you know, things fatigue with time. A door moves a little bit. The hardware gets a little worn, and now it's not perfectly straight. And I would look at the ability to adjust as a double-edged sword. What is that hinge like maintenance-wise when you add the ability to adjust? Do the adjustments themselves come loose, you know, at year 10? Does the hinge fatigue to the point where you can bring the door back up or however you need vis-a-vis those adjustments and it being a worthwhile sort of product? I've really never seen a concealed hinge like this fatigue with time. I did coincidentally see one yesterday that had, not unlike this hinge, but the entire assembly of laminated plates literally sagged from one leaf to the other. And I said to the contractor, was someone doing chin-ups on the door? And he may not have understood what I said, but then proceeded to tell me that it is a door that has a bookcase on the back, and he knows that the owner's children literally crawl up to the top of the bookcase and sit on the bookcase, likely adding 80 pounds to the weight of the door. And that did indeed cause that to fatigue a little bit. But that was literally a damaged hinge. Adjustability would not have corrected that at all. So we're going to look into what this hinge is all about and its adjustments. Let's start, and there will be supporting documentation down below, installation instructions. Let's do a visual tour of the item. You're going to get the hinge itself. A couple of dust caps, plastic dust boxes are here. There's two of them. You'll need to get them. They'll go behind the hinge, obviously. You are going to, of course, also have, this is in the matte black, and there are plastic snap-on caps to finish off the look of the hinge. So they're certainly doing different colors by different caps. And that's nice. It makes it easy. You could stock that hinge and stock a whole mess of caps, and now you've got every finish you need. Then, of course, they're going to give you your SMS, your sheet metal screws, and your wood screws. So whatever your application is, they've got hopefully enough fasteners here to get the job done. According to my hinge, there are 2 in this box, so each hinge is going to require 8 screws. Yeah, there's 16. There's certainly 16 wood screws, so that would make sense that you're getting 16 of each screw in the package. A little look at the extended description, then we're going to switch to the camera view. McKinney says that this concealed hinge is refined and minimal. The McKinney concealed hinge features 3-dimension adjustability for easy installation and door alteration. The snap-on covers concealed screws for a clean aesthetic. Yeah, they're definitely very clean hinges. There is a solid argument to make for a hinge that you cannot see at all. It's when the door's closed, you don't see the evidence of it. Very little downside to this. A downside might be some people might look at this hinge and say, I can't install that. they're really not hard, and we're going to go over it. I mean, it's actually very easy. I mean, you have two preps in your router, the body prep and then the plate prep. If you put it at the right backset and the right height, you're home free. The other downside is that you have to think about special templating when doors are hung on these hinges because of the vertical axis of pivoting and how it floats. That silver pin represents how the axis of pivoting actually moves through a slight arc through the opening and closing cycle. Okay, a hinge barrel, that vertical axis of pivoting is plumb, doesn't move at all as the door opens and closes. With concealed hinges like this, they do. You have to be mindful of your other hardware. And what I'm in particular thinking of and what it applies to would be overhead stops. If you're doing an upscale residence, I've done jobs with concealed hinges and overhead concealed stops. Super elegant because you've got a large apartment in Manhattan where you have a relatively large space, but everything is kind of compact. And you'll have conflict of doors opening into a commode, opening into another closet door, floor stops, hinge pin stops. You're building a $4 million condo. You're not using $3 hinge pin stops. You can't use them with this, obviously, anyway. So you have to be mindful of how a concealed hinge with a floating vertical axis of pivoting will affect your other hardware. Overhead stops is the piece of equipment that comes to mind. So let's continue on, switching to the screen view, and let's go over the extended description, its hinge capacity, what you're going to use and when. We're going to dive into the documents. We're going to talk about how to install it. I've mortised for these. Like I said, the first time I did it, I spent a half an hour looking at the template. I was, in my mind, incredibly sure of what I was about to do. I did it, and it worked perfectly. And after that, you graduate right to expert level. So let's move on to the screen view of this video. Okay, so here's the item that we're looking at, and let's dive in and take a closer look at it. The MK67001. First, what I want to do is take a look and see what other options they have. I thought that they had more than just one option on that hinge, but it's not coming up. In their catalog, they call it MK100. MK100. There they are. You just have to know what to call it to find that it'll come up. So they have a variety of concealed hinges. Okay. This document is very handy, and I'm sure that this is linked to down below. Different weight capacities is really what you're dealing with. And what is nice about these hinges is that there is a relationship between the quantity of hinges you are using and the total possible weight of what you'll hang. The good news is, doors that you're faced with, 3070, 3080, 4080, doors, typical 1 3/4 hollow metal wood doors, they don't exceed what these hinges can handle generally, okay? Even if you had a 4080 solid core door, a 4080 solid core door is going to be 4 times 32 times about 6 pounds per foot. So that's not right. I said 4 times 32. I meant 4 times 8. 192 pounds. So even a solid core 4080 door is not going to exceed what they're meant to handle. Okay, so you're probably going to be in good shape. What's nice about hinges like this is where they stop working in terms of door weight, other hardware stops working too, like door closers. Okay, door closers that are surface mounted don't work on, or they don't work well on doors that are 250 pounds plus. So this catalog cut is really nice because it will show you quickly what's happening with these other hinges. Okay. Refined minimal 3-dimension adjustability, easy installation. That's subjective. They're easy to install. They do take, you have to know how to mortise them, and you'll be able to do that by the end of this video, I hope. And door alteration. Snap-on covers conceal set screws for a clean aesthetic. This is certainly a concealed hinge. The base material is zinc. Now, where you'll get into trouble with hinges like this is there's one thing that is conspicuously missing. And what is conspicuously missing is no reference to UL listing. So the problem that we have here is using these on fire-rated doors. So that would certainly be a downside of this material. This video will be added to our extended description of this hinge. Okay, so that it'll be there for your review as well. But that would be our trouble, is that it's not permissible for use on a fire-rated door. Okay. Unfortunately, you won't. Using this on a fire-rated door would be expressly prohibited, is the bottom line. Now, I don't think you're going to encounter that problem often. The trouble is you'll have a client who will want to use these hinges throughout a space. And the issue is the majority of the doors will not be fire-rated. And you might have a couple that are, which puts you in a position of not being able to use a beautiful concealed hinge like this through and throughout. Okay, so be mindful of that. Let's get back to our description. Matte black, that's the color of this hinge. An overall size, and we're going to dive into the installation instructions and go over all of that. These are non-handed. They can swing left or right, left reverse, left-hand reverse, right-hand reverse bevel. 180 degree is permissible on the degree of opening of the door, provided that there is no conflict with casing, a wall condition. The hinge itself will go to 180. Okay, with the adjustability here expressed in millimeters. We'll show that. We'll demonstrate that. You can use it on wood or metal doors, wood or metal frames. Your minimum door thickness, however, is going to be 1 3/8 for the MK100. Okay, they have their other hinges here that will allow you to get to thinner doors. Okay, the MK40, 1.25 inch, MK80, MK100, 1 3/8. Okay, your door weight capacity, which is here as well. Now let's move into the supporting documentation. Okay, so we're back here at our supporting documentation. Let's click on product brochure. That's going to, of course, show us an overview of McKinney hinges. And that's a nice document because, quite frankly, it's going to show you hinges that are depicted in a very consolidated 8-page document, and we'll take you through a tour of really cool hinges that you may not have known were available. And what I mean by that is McKinney will give you these 2-knuckle and 3-knuckle hinges along with a heavyweight version. However, the standard weights have these beautiful decorative tips. Modern decorative tips, not your typical ball tip, urn tip, steeple tip, acorn tip. These are quite modern. These aren't your grandfather's decorative tips. Okay, so you'll continue through here. Then you've got a 5-knuckle standard weight. This is, of course, your go-to hinge. Modern options compared to the classic, the most common ball tip, steeple tip. That's nice too. You don't see those all the time, but they're kind of cool. I think you need to have more of a Victorian look to have steeple tip, but doesn't, use it. If you like it, that's good enough. Heavyweight version, so a much thicker hinge. Decorative 2- and 3-knuckle hinges. Now, these are cool. Square barrel hinges. They don't really show a great picture of these here at all, unfortunately. But you do have to... Here, let's just try this. A square knuckle hinge. from a cross-section perspective. Okay, so when you look at that door in elevation, all you're seeing is this really cool square profile. The factory does need to know if your doors are square-edged or beveled, because the swag that they will put on the hinge leaf, you know, is dependent on, sorry, that's supposed to be square, is dependent on its square or beveled, because you don't want the hinge to be kind of disjointed. For the barrels to be, from each leaf, to not be completely in line with each other. So if you use your imagination, you know, with these square barrel hinges, you can kind of see it a little bit better here. These need to be lined up, and the swag that they're going to put on the hinge leaf underneath is going to be based on square or beveled edge. So be sure to qualify that. I did 1 or 2 jobs with these. They were really cool. Don't sell a lot of them. I wish we sold more because I think they look great. Now, we move into their concealed hinge offerings. Their olive knuckle hinges, which are really cool as well. That's very much a 19th century sort of hinge. But what really drives home how beautiful their architectural hardware looks is what they're doing here. Black suede powder coat, white suede powder coat. They're accommodating these requests for these custom finishes. There was a marketing document put out by Assa Abloy, who is the parent company of McKinney. The parent company of McKinney, Rockwood, Pemco, Sargent, Medico, Yale, Corbin Russwin, Norton, okay, on and on. And that document basically said, get a piece of paper and email us what you're looking for, your custom idea. And if we've got the machinery to make it, we'll be happy to. And we'll probably be able to give it to you in any finish you want as well. So in this regard, McKinney, a la Assa Abloy, making all of these custom variations, these beautiful derivatives from standard builder's hardware, to attempt to meet the demands of the market is, in my opinion, a renaissance. Because if you looked at a hardware catalog from the year 1890, you didn't have, like 25 years ago, you didn't have 3 hinge choices, you had 30, okay? You didn't have 3 designs of levers, you had 50. You didn't have 6 or 8 finishes, you had 30. So it's a renaissance nowadays. I would imagine that modern, manufacturing processes has everything to do with it. If they've got the machinery to make it, they will entertain it. McKinney's sister company, Rockwood, is the poster child for eagerness to accommodate the custom requests from the marketplace. Okay, so that is the product brochure, and let's move on to the cut sheet now. Okay, now our cut sheet. Okay, a review of everything we've discussed. We'll also touch on some basic dimensional properties, because these are questions that are asked immediately and right after sort of situation. What size is it? How big is it? I'm seeing obviously things in metric here, so converting is going to be important. If you are of a certain age and you don't speak metric, that is understandable, because I didn't either. But we have to work in this ever shrinking world. One thing that I like to do is, if I want to find out the size of, for those of us that don't find metric, our first method of measurement, let's just say 160 millimeters overall height. Okay, great. I don't know, how big is that? A foot? A mile? So 1 divided by it would be 160 divided by 25.4. 25.4 millimeters per inch. Doing the math, that's 6.29 inch. So what are we really looking at here? 6 1/4 is 6.25. That would be 6 4/16. That would be 6 8/32. That's going to be about 40 thousandths bigger. 6 8/32 would be like 6 9/32. Well, 6 9/32. Okay. So if we went 1 divided by 32 times 9 plus 6, that's going to give us 6.28 inch. So that's going to be really close to that. So that's just the methodology I use to go about converting things back and forth, or from metric to imperial. You know, whatever. We have to work with the information given to us. Being a very European hinge in origin, we can understand why it's in metric. But there you go. Okay. Installation and structure, or a dimensional overview. And indeed, the next document for us to get to is indeed going to be our installation instructions. Oh, that video is there. Okay. There you go. Very handy. Installation instructions. Let's just dive into it. We do indeed have our installation instructions pulled up here, and you know, McKinney does a good job of really distilling this down into the essence of what it is that we're really dealing with. What's important to know is that it's atypical in terms of installing these hinges in most applications, meaning what I'm driving at there is typical construction, and the way that the hinges have been tested is compliant with how they're asking you to position them. 2 at the top is what they're saying. If you're in Europe, you will, or on a cruise boat, because many cruise boats are manufactured in Europe or European shipyards, you'll always see 2 hinges at the top, and that is the opposite way of how we do it. Unfortunately for us and our pride, this is the better way to do it, because 70% of the weight of the door is hung on that top hinge. So you really want to have more hinge at the top of the door than, you know, being in the middle. It's more effective at doing the job of carrying the load when it is closer to the top. They're saying 1/3 from the top. It would not harm you to go further to the top. However, I would absolutely follow the guidelines of what the hinge is calling out. The issue that we have, though, is if you're doing wood doors, and you very likely are, I would get it in writing from your wood door manufacturer that installing your door with these hinges will not violate their warranty. They could... The rope that they could use to hang us with would be that the door is improperly hung. So I don't know if this hinge is defined as improperly hung. So you'll want to be clear and upfront before you order 30 doors for these hinges, and you've got 5 of them that are warped. And then the door manufacturer comes in and says, well, you know, I'd love to help you, but you don't have the door properly hung. And that's just a very, very bad position for all parties to be in the middle of. So I would clarify that, and I say that because I've been involved in those types of conversations where, yeah, it's center hung pivots. The manufacturer's not going to warrant that door if it warps. And sure enough, 1 out of 10 doors are warped in my experience, my actual door manufacturing experience. So as we get our overview of what we're wrapping our head around, here's your hinge arrangement. Here are your dimensional properties. Okay, and we're going to talk about these dimensions are important to know, but it's when we get down here is where they're really important to know. Actually, it's all right here, not here. It's actually everything we need is actually right here. Okay, so minimum door height is 80 inch. Door minimum thickness is 1 3/8. You can hang a 15-inch thick door on this. It doesn't matter in the sense that you need to observe a hinge back set for this to work. on all these hinges, and where that comes into play is a 4-inch maximum backset, a 4 millimeter maximum backset. So provided that you observe that 4 millimeter maximum, so what you're saying is, switch back to this. Here is a rough drawing of that hinge. Okay, your door is going to come in here at your door, and that's your frame. The dimension in here cannot be exceeded, otherwise the hinge isn't going to open. Okay, so they have to have the hinge leaf fairly close to the edge of the frame and the door in order for that to work, and the maximum dimension of that is 4 millimeter. If you made that larger, you would definitely find yourself in a position where, you know, the door will not articulate into its opening cycle because the hinge is installed so far that the door will make substantial premature contact with the jamb. Hinge spacing does not affect load capacity, so that's an important note to have. The first door should always be checked before preparing more doors, if any. When installing a door closer, at least 3 hinges are required, and reduce maximum door weight in chart by 30%. So they're saying if you are going to install your hinges and you're going to put them in the traditional top, middle, bottom arrangement, that does not affect your capacity. I would say, though, it would affect the hinge's ability to be as efficient as possible. So I think if you were to install a door here, a hinge here, here, and here, and then top, middle, bottom, and then you cycled it for 20 million cycles, I think that you would see different wear patterns on that top hinge. Does that really matter? Probably not. But nonetheless, they're calling it in this arrangement for a reason, but they're also saying that you're not going to affect your capacity based on hinge spacing. Now, obviously that is to be taken with an understanding that you're going to install the hinges at a standardized location. You know, if you put one here and one here and one here, you could definitely affect the operation of the door. Now, why are they saying when you're installing a door closer, it reduces the weight capacity by 30%? Because a door closer puts substantial additional force onto the hinges. So if you have a door closer installed, you will need to adjust these numbers by 30%. So be mindful of that. Okay. Now let's kind of move into an overview of these dimensions, and let's talk about how to go about actually machining the material. Now, as we continue on with our installation instructions, really the mortising. And the installation is basically a two-step sort of prep, meaning you just need to make the preparation in the edge of the door and the frame look like this in cross-section, and then this width that they have here of 28 millimeters. Okay, so you know that the overall width from here down to here, that's going to be your 160 millimeter. Okay, you know that. This 138 millimeter, that's important to know because it just tells you the center of your screws, but you're not mortising anything for that. You've got 28 millimeter wide. You have two dimensions here now because you have two preparations. You've got we're going to call this shallow one the plate, and we're going to call this the body, the deeper prep. So your deep prep, your body prep, is going to be 36.5 millimeter deep, and then your shoulder prep is going to be, your plate prep is 10.5 millimeter deep. The question becomes is, what is the length? We know this is 160 millimeter here to here. We know it's 28 millimeter wide. The question becomes is, what's our next dimension? Well, it's literally right here. 131 millimeter from here down to here. So you need the 160, you need the 131, and that's going to be on the same center line. You know that you've got 28 millimeter here, and now you have your two depths, 36.5 and 10.5. What I would do is I would print that installation instructions out, and I would convert all that to imperial if that's what I was dealing with, and I would simply move on from there. It's, we digest or break this down, it's pretty simple. That 138 millimeter, that's awfully nice to know because you're certainly going to pre-drill your holes, but you're probably going to stick your, well, if you're a hollow metal door manufacturer, yeah, you need to know that in order to find out where all that stuff is. Now the B dimension, let's see what the B dimension is. I'm thinking that is a reference to the center line. Okay, so again, 28 millimeter, 36 and a half they said earlier, I think, or 10 and a half. This is really crucial, that 4 millimeter max from the face of the door and the face of the frame to the hinge prep. So they're clearly showing, I believe that they're clearly showing, they certainly are. When you look at the hinge as well, there's no inset on this. There's no inset at all. That R1, they want you to break that edge slightly. They want a little bit of detail taken off there. They want a broken edge there. 1 millimeter to 6 millimeter maximum. You're going to achieve that based on your adjustability, which we'll go over shortly. Speed dimension here, they're just telling you the gap between the edge of the door and the frame. You know, 1/8 of an inch is what you're going to need for typical hinge construction, except because of our floating vertical axis of pivoting, adherence to the minimum gap required is important because, you know, that vertical axis of pivoting really arcs through, doesn't it? It comes in like a half of an ellipse. You know, in a normal hinge, your vertical axis of pivoting will be here. Well, this vertical axis of pivoting kind of does that, right? So that's why as you go to a thicker door, you need more of a gap because your door, as it cycles open, kind of moves in this direction as it opens. So the door moving in this direction and then opening is kind of a exaggerated way to demonstrate why that gap needs to be heavier. You know, looking at the rest of the installation instructions, I don't see anything else to cover that we do need to cover. You know, a 12-inch radius, a 12 millimeter radius is what they're looking for there. You're obviously going to need to pick bits that are going to be compatible with what you're doing, router bits, and that is certainly how I would go about mortising these. I would use a plunge router. If I was going to take my door, the edge of my door, if I'm looking at my door laid out, I'm going to take my plunge router and I'm going to do just a deep prep like this. Okay. Then I would come in and do an additional prep just across here, except that all this is already gone. So I would not do this prep and then this prep. I would do the deep work first because as you are working with a heavy router, with a very quickly spinning router bit, you want to eliminate the possibility of nicking the door by giving yourself the ability to do that finished plate work last. It's just, you know, one out of 500 times I'm mortising a door, I say to myself, boy, I'm glad I did the deep work first because I kind of did something. You know, in particular, not so much an issue with these hinges because they're 28 millimeter for the depth of both preps, the body and the plate prep. But if this body prep was a little bit smaller and you had a shoulder inside of here, that would kind of help you to have when you're doing the plate prep second. So now what we do is we move into the hinge adjustments. And this document, and I've looked at installation instructions from other people who do three-way, 3D adjustable hinges. Okay, I can think of, you know, other people who make those. And they do a good job at showing you what you are literally adjusting. Okay, so you have the ability to adjust vertically, you have the ability to adjust laterally, then you have the ability to adjust in depth. Okay, So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to grab a hinge and our 4mm Allen wrench, and we're going to demonstrate how the adjustments are. Vertical adjustment, 2.5 millimeter plus or minus. And there's instructions on how to make this work, and we'll go over that. Your depth range. Now the depth range, you know, if you're mortising your doors to the proper, if everything is on center, adjusting vertically should not really be required. But it is nice to have that depth adjustment for the eventual sag that all things do in time. Or a door that used to be a perfect rectangle is now more of a parallelogram, the opening. So adjusting your depth can help kind of keep the door working better. So in that regard, having the ability to adjust may not be a negative thing at all. Depth adjustment and horizontal adjustment take place simultaneously. Loosen both blocking screws and adjust. So let's switch the view back to the camera and let's actually adjust the hinge in real time. Now, if you still have those installation instructions open, let's go over adjustment step A. First, adjustments, and I'm reading it here. Adjustments to hinge are made with a 4mm Allen wrench, not included. All hinges carry load for proper installations. All hinges should carry load for proper installation. Okay, I think what they're saying is the hinge actually has to be under load so that you can adjust and see the doing it here in my hand, I'm not going to be able to manipulate screws and see the door move. It's got to be under load, you know, but we'll get the concept here. Step A, or vertical adjustment in A, loosen both blocking screws. Blocking? Or maybe locking screws. And make sure that top adjustment screw 2 is even with front surface of hinge. If it is not, rotate screw until position is correct. Adjust hinge by turning bottom screw 2, then tighten the blocking screws. Okay, so this screw and this screw are what they're calling the blocking screws. We're going to loosen those because that's what locks this in place. We're going to loosen those. Then screw 2, they want it to be flush with the outside of the hinge, and I'm going to make it, and what we have here, it's not, and I'm going to loosen it so that it is. This one already is. At that point, we now have some adjustment that can occur here. Okay? That's where the adjustment's going to occur. So as you manipulate these screws, then you're going to affect a difference in height. Once you have it affected correctly, and you'll need to obviously work them both, you're then going to tighten up your blocking screws to keep those securely in position, is what you're going to do. Admittedly, it would be better to show this under load, but that manufacturer's original catalog is going to express that. Then moving into the B, the depth adjustment range. B is depth adjustment 1 millimeter. Let's take a look at that. Okay, so what they're saying is that depth adjustment in B, go to C, horizontal adjustment. Depth adjustment is plus or minus 1 millimeter. Horizontal adjustment. So when I think depth, I think the hinge, moving in terms of the depth of the hinge. And when they say horizontal adjustment, that's where I'm thinking depth adjustment. The term depth adjustment, I'm thinking lateral positioning, where you are literally affecting the position of this hinge in the cavity itself laterally, you know, but that's not what they're calling it, so we're going to call it what they call it. Now that'll happen on the other hinge leaf, where the step C, the horizontal adjustment, and the depth adjustment, your lateral adjustment. So depth, if you're looking at the door in elevation, the depth, like the inset dimension, will be happen simultaneously. Loosen both blocking screws 3 3 are these horizontal screws here and here. So let's just loosen those. That's definitely loose. Okay, I've got them loose. And adjust hinge by alternately turning both screws 4. Okay, and now here is where we're going to, I want to look at that. Okay, so that's real easy to see. If you just study the position of this plate, and as I rotate, you can see how that moves back and forth. So you're obviously going to need to affect okay, really interesting. So check it out. They say that the horizontal and depth occur simultaneously. Watch this seam here as I back it out. So we know that we're moving the plate, we're shifting it this way. We know that's happening. But the other thing that's happening simultaneously, now watch what they call horizontal. As the plate is moving this way, it's also moving in depth as well. Okay, so all that, those two do indeed happen at the same time. And once you get the hinge, and you'll loosen them both and you'll work them both, top and bottom, obviously, a little top, little bottom. Then once it's all set, tighten your blocking screws, which is what they're showing to be number 3. Yeah, right, number 3, that's right. So we'll tighten those back up so they go to the client. They don't seem odd. Yeah, it's fine. Okay. And those are your 3 adjustments. The other thing you're going to obviously have are your 2 holes here and here for your screws. Okay. You'll be able to adjust that. Plastic dust boxes, those are awfully nice. You don't want the inner construction of your door, your particulate from the wall creeping into your living space. That's to be sure. Let's see what else we have in the installation instructions that need to have our attention called to it. Installation. Insert each hinge section marked door into door sockets. So I ought to have said this immediately and early on. There is a hinge leaf and there is a door leaf. They are not interchangeable in that regard. However, you know, they can be used in the sense of, you know, you can use the hinge this way. This is the door leaf. This can be a right-hand door. It can be a left-hand door. Okay? That's how it's non-handed. But the door leaf is always the door leaf. The frame leaf is always the frame leaf. That I think exists for all of these hinges that I've seen. Insert each hinge section marked door into the door sockets created via your milling. You know, the original language this was written in is certainly not English. In your milling, hinges should be flush against door edge surface, sure. So initially, your leaves should be flush. Secure hinge sections with your screws, and again, they're certainly included. Here's your machine screws, there are your wood screws. Set door on frame by inserting each loose hinge section into the socket created by milling, and then secure. Make your adjustments, then insert your snap covers. You should have a total of 4 snap covers per hinge, and that's what's going to that will then finally explain the other tiny holes. These 2 holes here, these 2 holes here. I would suggest that you lay out all your plates first. Some of them have the logo on them, others don't. 2 have logos and 2 don't. And then you're simply going to snap those in, or push fit those in. That's going to finish your installation. Nice looking plastic, black plastic. That's how it's going to be. Insert front hinge covers. Removal of covers should be done carefully. Yeah, sure. Be very gingerly will you want to try to pry those out. You might want to try to pull it out evenly. I would imagine that getting snap covers, while it wouldn't prove to be very expensive, it might prove to be a lot of work to get the factory to send us some of those. 2 per box is how these arrived to us. This client ordered 8. And I think they're going to be pretty thrilled with what they have here. Does appear to be a nice looking hinge by all by all means. So you're going to need a 4mm Allen wrench. That would be the only thing not included. Let's finish up this video now with any last final words that I might have. That video down below, it's a 3-minute video. Let's just fire that up and take a look at it here on camera, or on screen. A little mini sample that they have. That's awfully nice. Okay, showing how to pop those covers off, obviously. All the covers removed. 4mm wrench to set the door's vertical position. Loosen the blocking screws, or what they're doing. Obviously, all of them. 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever you're doing. You can't move one without moving all of them. Then you're going to affect your height adjustment screws. He's made a couple of turns, but he has to do it, you know, all together to get that to move. And it's a bit undetectable to kind of see what's happening, but it does appear to be, yeah, you could see it literally there in that last turn that affected a height change. Now he's re-securing the blocking screws. Okay. Right here in this video, right at this point, study the movement or the position of that door, right at the bottom. He's about to start to affect change on all of the other screws. Now let's go back. You can kind of see when I jump back how that door moves. Okay, so we can tell that it's actually moving in vertical height. And that's what they're saying, you know, the door's got to be under load in order to be able to really get movement out of this. Tightening all the blocking screws as we just demonstrated. And notice how they're being tightened like you would tires on a car. Now, we're going to set the gap and the lateral and the depth. And again, those are being done at the same time. Loosening the blocking screws again. Now we're going to start to set the depth and the lateral movement. And if you really look at the top, you can see the door starting to just move in that direction. And now you're moving the bottom of the door out as well. Oh yeah, you can definitely tell that that's moving. Moving it back to the original position. Awfully nice to have that T-handle Allen wrench, that's for sure. If you're going to do these a lot, I would invest in a rubber-coated handled T Allen wrench. Now he's tightening the blocking screws, and that's going to wrap up that video. Okay, tightened up, snap covers going back on, and that's a wrap. Now, in conclusion, these concealed hinges, they're pretty popular. There used to be the good old-fashioned, and they still exist, and they're still the good old-fashioned concealed hinges that are non-adjustable. We all know their name, etc. And I can tell you over the last 5 years, we sell a lot more adjustable versions than non-adjustable versions. I'm suspect in terms of, as I said earlier, the long term of having mechanical screws holding a door where it needs to be. you ever walk through your house and heard something hit the floor, and you realize eventually, like a week later, you go through a doorway and you see a hinge pin laying on the floor, decorative tips with threads, constant maintenance problem. Things are always becoming loosened. Handles on doors, screws that hold closers in, screws that hold hinges in, always coming loose. So I'm suspect long term. And from the perspective of the distributor, if it's an issue, we're obligated to say I'm suspect of that long term. What I'm saying is I think the screws would be subject to coming loose over time, and now my door's not hanging right. I tighten it back up, and 6 months later I have to tighten it up. I have no experience that is actually the case with this McKinney MK100 or any hinge of its ilk. But screws are meant to come loose, and that's my one reservation about this stuff. However, they're beautiful. They don't cause many problems. They are the hallmark of hardware is best when you don't see it. And if you have to see it, make it as elegant as possible. It's hard to make a hinge elegant, even though McKinney, as we said earlier, showed earlier, square hinges, decorative tips, 2-knuckle, 3-knuckle, 5-knuckle, olive knuckle. They do great work with making it look beautiful. And this is a step, and certainly this is a great piece of that overall package. Report back if you have any sort of feedback. I would love to hear from you about, do those screws come loose? Because 3-way adjustable hinges like this have only been on the market for so many years. I'd like to have actual field experience from an owner who has to deal with, whether or not that is an issue. So below this video is a link to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the McKinney products that we sell, a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. McKinney has been in business for several decades. On that link to the manufacturer's page, you will be able to pull up several decades, a century. You'll be able to pull up a McKinney catalog from 1929. Very interesting. And they were known, they made forged iron hardware. Hammer iron forged hardware is kind of what McKinney was. So that's a neat look. If you look at 19th century construction, a lot of that stuff was hammer forged. So that catalog is interesting to review what hardware looked like almost 100 years ago. Other catalog information is there. It's the repository area of all of our encyclopedic documents for McKinney. If you have any questions on the MK100 3-way adjustable hinge or any other, it's an MK67001, or any other McKinney product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.